Hi folks, P here. And can you believe it's been another month since our last mailbag video? Well, this time, I've got some real doozies, and they're things that any one of you might encounter while you're here. We have a man who accidentally started a feud with his next door neighbor, a guy who's giving his Filipina the cold shoulder, and a man who gave in to temptation when a beautiful Filipina stranger made an offer he couldn't refuse. Okay, we got a lot of good stuff today, so let's get started with an email from James S. from Canada. Dear P, I decided to spend 4 months in the Philippines to see if I liked it enough to eventually move there. I wanted to assimilate into the local culture as best I could. So instead of staying in a hotel in the city, I got a short term lease on a small house in a provincial area where I'm trying to learn some of the local language and experience the food. So one Sunday afternoon, I was sitting in my living area watching a little TV when I suddenly caught a whiff of heavy smoke. I thought it might be an electrical fire due to the pungent odor, but after checking everything, I realized that the smoke was coming from outside. I stepped into the backyard and I could see a thick column of smoke rising from the next door neighbor's place. I couldn't see the fire itself because of a wall between the properties, and I was afraid that his house was on fire. I couldn't get directly to his house without running down the street and navigating my way through the neighborhood. But when I finally got there, I found a man standing next to an inferno of blazing junk: plastic bottles, a bicycle tire, and bags of what was probably garbage. I guess the guy wasn't expecting an out of breath foreigner to come running up to him, because he just looked at me with a blank face and waited for me to speak. I thought about trying out my Tagalog, but since I couldn't find the words, I stuck to English and told him that my house was filling up with the smoke from his fire. He just looked at me with a straight face and said, "I'm burning trash. I'll be done soon." And that was it. No apology, nothing. I was kind of stunned, but I didn't know what else to say, so I turned and left. I assumed he got the message that I was not happy about the smell and the smoke, and everything seemed fine after that, for about 2 weeks, when the same thing happened all over again. Now, I'm not usually the type to complain, especially when I'm in a foreign country, but breathing the fumes from someone's trash can't be healthy, not to mention the stink, and it was really affecting my quality of life. I considered going over there again, but I was afraid of an altercation, so I decided to appeal to the authorities. I remember watching one of your videos about the local chain of command, and if I had a problem, I should talk to the barangay captain, which is what I did. The man spoke decent English, so I explained the problem, and he said he'd have a talk with the neighbor that same day. Now, I couldn't see over the wall, but I could hear them talking after he got to my neighbor's place. Of course, I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it sounded like a friendly conversation that included a lot of laughing. I was hoping that was the end of the problem, but almost immediately, things got even worse. Just 2 days later, I found a dead rat in my backyard. I didn't think much of it, but the very next day, I found a disposable diaper, and judging from the smell, it was full. But the worst was yet to come. Uh oh. The next weekend, I was inside eating a meal when I heard what sounded like rocks hitting the tin roof of my house. I went outdoors in time to see dark brown projectiles flying over the neighbor's wall and onto my house. I ran inside to get my phone to record it, but when I got back outside, it had stopped. When I inspected the objects that landed on my roof, in my yard, and even against the walls of my house, I discovered that they were fresh dog excrement. Needless to say, I'm in over my head and I need some advice. I don't dare confront the neighbor for fear of getting killed, and I've already been to the barangay captain who might just think this is all very funny. I'm not familiar enough with your culture to know where to turn, so I'm turning to you. How can I handle this situation to make it stop? Or do I just take my stuff and leave? Oh, James, I'm so sorry for your situation. You didn't do anything wrong, and I'm sure you're really angry and scared. I'll tell you what I do. But feel free not to follow my advice if you're not comfortable with it. So let me start with the subject of burning trash. You're not supposed to burn solid waste in your yard, but a lot of people still do it. It creates toxic smoke, but it seems like most people just don't care. So you're technically in the right, but of course that doesn't help your situation. Now, you might automatically assume that your neighbor's reacting like this because you're a foreigner, but that's probably not the reason. It's because you dared to complain. Most Filipinos think they can do whatever they want on their property, and if you don't like it, that's your problem. Things like smoke and bad smells mean nothing here, so you're expected to just suck it up, buttercup. Now, you didn't say whether the burning stopped after the first visit of the barangay captain, but if it did, he probably told your neighbor to cut it out. And he's not actually laughing at your problem. Most of the barangay officials just want peace and quiet, and they take their jobs seriously. But what should you do next? Well, if you've only got a few weeks left on your lease and you don't feel like fighting this, I'd probably just pack up my stuff and go. Stay at a hotel in town and make the best of your remaining time. But if you're like me and you don't like letting someone push you around, here's what I'd do. First, I'd buy a cheap CCTV camera and point it at your back wall. If anything comes flying over it, you'll have it recorded. Second, you could talk to the captain again, or you could go straight to the actual police, the PNP. You might be thinking that this could infuriate your neighbor even more and put your life in danger. And I suppose that's always a possibility. But Filipinos won't usually do anything bold like that. We just do the crap we think we can get away with. If anything happened, it'd be pretty obvious who is the prime suspect. So I wouldn't worry too much about physical harm. But instead of going to the police, I have a suggestion that keeps you out of the loop. Call your landlord and explain what was going on. Tell them that your neighbor's causing property damage and let them deal with the cops. They speak the language, they know how to get things done, and you won't have to put your name on any complaint forms. If everything works out, there won't be any more stinky meteorites, and you can relax on your couch and watch a good movie. Although it might be too soon to watch Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. No matter what you decide, please let me know what happens, okay, James? This is not how we want to treat our foreign guests. So the next email is from Randall in Bacolod, who writes, Filipina P. I got a question about my girlfriend. Uh-oh. I rented an apartment and every time she comes over, she starts complaining about how cold it is. I'm originally from Michigan in the US and I'm not used to the heat here, especially in January, so I like to keep the thermostat at about 70 degrees. Every time I turn around, she's bumping it up to 80, which is too hot for me and makes me sweat. I don't want to take 2 showers a day, but when I set the air conditioning to where I'm comfortable, she says she just can't take it and has to leave. Even when we're driving around during the day, if I turn on the AC, she starts making a fuss and says it's making her sick. What am I supposed to do? Lose my girlfriend or keep burning in hell? All I can say is, welcome to the thermostat wars, Randall. It's a very common problem at first. Filipinos are just used to the heat and our bodies are set to a different temperature. This is something a lot of mixed couples go through, but I promise it will eventually end. Now, I know it sounds like she's making it up, but it's true that many Filipinos actually get car sick when you turn on the AC. I'm not sure why it triggers motion sickness, but it does. The good news is that she'll eventually get over it like I did, but it'll be a gradual process. The same thing with your apartment. Most couples settle on a reasonable temperature, and your girlfriend's body will definitely adjust to the cooler air. Until then, get a warm blanket ready, and when she comes over, just drape it around her. If she says it's not fair that you get to decide the temp, remind her that you can only take so many clothes off, but she can put more on. The best part is, turning the temperature down at night guarantees you'll have a Filipina snuggle bunny till morning. And finally, we have our last email of the day from Matt D, who didn't list his location. Matt says, Miss P, I've got a real mess on my hands. I've already asked my best friend for advice, but I want to hear what you have to say from the perspective of a Filipina. So, my story starts 5 years ago when I was visiting your country. I was 42 at the time, and even though I was single, I wasn't there looking for women. I was there to attend a conference. And a few days before I was due to leave, I was sitting there at a small cafe down the street from my hotel, having lunch, when I had the strangest encounter of my life. The gorgeous young woman who'd brought me my food approached my table again and smiled. Of course, I thought she was just gonna ask if I needed anything else, but the words she said next, I'll never forget. Will you give me your baby? I was stunned for a second, and I thought she mistakenly believed I had a baby somewhere. But as I was puzzling it out, she added, I don't want you to marry me. I just want to have a baby. You can imagine my complete shock, but she went on to explain that she thought I was very attractive and that she always wanted a mixed baby to raise on her own. She expected nothing from me except my seed, and she wouldn't even need to know my name. Now, before I explain what happened, let me tell you that this was probably one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen. But the first thing that went through my mind was that this had to be some sort of scam or that she was planning to rob me. I mean, how often does a guy get a no strings offer like that? Well, here in the Philippines, more often than you think. But there was just something so innocent about her, something that told me she meant no harm. I admit I was lonely and probably not thinking with the right head. And since I knew I was leaving soon, never to return, I decided, what the heck? If that's what she wanted, I'd be happy to help. We agreed that she'd come to my hotel after work, and after the sun went down, she actually met me down in the lobby. I brought her up to my room, and let's just say we both had a very enjoyable encounter. Oh, come on, that's it? I was just getting into this. It was just pure sex for the both of us, but I certainly didn't mind upholding my end of the bargain. I was thinking that would be the end of it, but then she asked if we could do it again the next day to increase the chances. I readily agreed, and there was an encore performance. And after that, as agreed, we went our separate ways. She did tell me her name was Evangeline, and I lied and told her my name was Charlie, but other than that, no information was exchanged. Fast forward 5 years. I'm married now, and it just so happens that once again, my business has taken me back to the Philippines. I'm very happy with my wife, but we have no children of our own other than her son from a previous marriage. But there's always been a nagging question at the back of my mind, and I often wonder if I actually do have a child after all. So here's my question, and I bet you already know what it is. Would it be wrong of me to try to track down Evangeline and see if we actually made a child? I only have her first name, unless she gave me a fake one too, so I can't find her on social media. But I do know where she works, or at least used to work 5 years ago. So maybe I'd get lucky and able to find out where she is now. I don't want a relationship with her. I just want to know if I left something of myself behind. Would showing up out of the blue mess with her head? Especially since I'd be disappearing again. Or would she be happy to see me after all this time? I keep going back and forth on this, and I'd be interested in what you have to say. Thanks for listening, and I'm sorry if I took up too much of your time. Yours truly, Matthew. Wow, Matthew. What an unusual situation. Although I've actually heard something similar before. It's funny how the choices we make in the heat of the moment can affect our whole lives, and your story is a perfect example. And no, I certainly don't mind you writing a mini novel. If you added in the juicy parts, you can turn it into a best-selling book. But before I tell you what I think, let me tell you why you shouldn't have done what you did. Not to make you feel bad, but because there are other people watching this, and there are things they need to consider. Having a Filipino walk up and ask you to get her pregnant isn't really all that uncommon. It probably sounds bizarre to you folks, but I bet there'll be several people in the comment section who've had it happen to them too. The thing is, if you agree to that, you're putting yourself at risk in a bunch of different ways. First, there's the health issue. You never want to have unprotected sex with a stranger, for obvious reasons. Next is the fact that the woman might actually be married and tempting you with sex so that her husband can extort money out of you. Sleeping with a married woman is illegal, and they can actually cause you all kind of problems if you get accused of something like that. But the biggest reason to say no is because even if it doesn't bother you to have a child with an uncertain future, born to a woman who might not have any parenting skills, you have to understand that a lot of Filipinos aren't thinking clearly when they volunteer to be a single mom. All they know is that they want a baby, especially a mixed baby. But many of them have no business having a child they can't support. And then when you agree to this, you're just adding another burden to a person who probably already has quite a few. And now that I got that out of the way, let's talk about your situation. So let's say you locate this woman and find out you made a child together. What then? You're just gonna say, oh, that's cool, high five, and then leave again? What if she's single and desperately poor? Are you gonna offer to support her financially, or could you really just walk away? And what if she's married to an abusive alcoholic? Are you prepared to step in and rescue the child? If your kid's in danger, you might have to. But understand that by inserting yourself back into the mix, you're opening a can of worms you might regret. Now, maybe you should step up and care for the child no matter what. But first, you have to consider the serious problems you might create in your marriage. Does your wife even know about any of this? You mentioned discussing this with your best friend, so I'm guessing your wife has no clue. But if she did, what would she say? Is all of this really worth it just to satisfy your curiosity? I suppose you could confess everything to your wife before you get here. And if you have her blessing, you could try to answer your burning question, but with a plan in place for how you'd handle every possible outcome. But if you don't have your wife's full support, my advice is to let sleeping dogs lie. I can't answer those questions for you, but unlike the night you gave in to temptation, this time, you really need to consider the consequences of your actions. I don't think I need to tell you that I'm really interested in finding out what you decided, so I hope to hear from you after this is all over. Best of luck, Matt. Well, that's it for another episode of Mailbag Friday, and I'll be back on Tuesday with something fresh. Till then, folks. Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? If you think about it, I'm kind of like your maid, helping you clean up the mess from past relationships and wiping away those doubts about dating here in the Philippines. The only thing I ask for my service is that you leave a thumbs up on this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you can hire me again sometime. And if you check out my Patreon page full of extra content and exclusive features, you'll have made my day. Now, while I finish working, why not check out some of my other videos where I come clean about a lot of different topics? By the way, do you want me to clean your pipes?